Hey everyone, welcome back to this channel of random things usually to do with acting. I've been getting a lot of comments about my sound in various situations. My sound in voiceover, my sound where I'm currently sitting, and it is a very dense topic, sound. So I thought, let's just smush it together in one nice chunky video and talk about sound. I've got my trusty, well, not my trusty tablet, the tablet I have stolen from my partner, here because I feel like I'm going to need to draw stuff. And I don't have a whiteboard yet. So we're going to start with some of the theory behind it, because the theory applies to sound generally in any setting. If you know the theory, you can go into basically any space and make it sound better than it is. If you don't have those basics, then you're doing what you've seen other people do and you have no idea why you're doing it or if it's working. So, tablet time. The two things you are aiming to do when you are treating a space or trying to make it sound better. The first thing is, that's an eraser, that's not doing anything. Silence is number one. And number two is dead sound. Right, so these are the two things you want to achieve: silence and dead sound. What exactly does that mean and how do we achieve it? Silence focuses on your external, I feel like I'm going to make so many spelling mistakes doing this, your external environment, and dead sound focuses more on your internal environment. Internal. Silence, we're talking about all the sounds around you that you don't want to record. So for instance, if you're doing voiceover and you're in a box, you need really clean sound. So if I can hear the neighbor outside, a plane, a train, my dog, my partner going up and down the stairs, my fridge buzzing, my microwave buzzing, any of that stuff is considered noise. We do not want that. So that's all the sound, the external sound, the sound that should be outside of our recording space. None of that should really be in our recording space. Dead sound, we're talking about, so once you've got rid of all that external sound, then to achieve dead sound, we need to look at the space we are inside, the space we are recording in, and shape how the sound waves move in that internal environment. So it's a two-pronged approach. Now, to achieve silence, you need to focus on isolation. That looks right. Isolation. To achieve dead sound, it's a three-pronged approach. 1, 2, 3. You need to think about room size, room shape, and acoustic treatment. Lots of things. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is the silence, the external noises, because there's only one thing to talk about there. Isolation. When people build professional sound booths, they will often build a room inside a room. The reason they do this, and it's heavy-duty materials, is because they need to separate. You need to somehow separate yourself from all the external noises. And sound waves, I'm not going to go into detail about how they move here because we will be here for a very long time. Sound waves can travel through boundaries. For instance, if I'm in this room, the sound waves can travel through the door or through the wall into the next room if it's not a very thick wall, and someone outside could hear me. It's why in certain houses you can hear people standing outside having a conversation, because sound waves can travel through surfaces. What you want to try and do is make sure that any of the sound waves that you do not want to capture, from planes and trains and conversations to the buzz of a fridge, you are able to separate yourself from that. You are able to isolate yourself from that. So this involves isolation, or, that was the worst bracket ever, sound proofing. And this is where a lot of actors go wrong. They'll say to me, I've soundproofed my space. No, you haven't. Soundproofing involves very heavy-duty materials to separate yourself from those external sounds. What they mean is they've done acoustic treatment, which is where you see people plaster foam all over the walls. That's not going to help for this element. This is not going to help for achieving silence. To achieve silence, you need heavy-duty materials, which is why you'll see me when I'm recording voiceover. I'm in a box that weighs 750 kilograms. It is dense. I hate moving it because putting it together, like the individual pieces, are very, very heavy. It's layers upon layers of felt wood and insulation, dense insulation material. So that is what you need for silence. Now, obviously, achieving silence and isolating yourself from external noises is one of the hardest things to do if you are beginning and you don't have the money to outlay on one of these giant boxes that is next to me that you can't see. This is why people look for rooms that are internal in your house, that do not have an external wall. So if you can, because then you've created a room within a room that you control all the space of. The problem with being outdoors or being in even share houses to an extent is you don't control all the space. If you have a flat, for instance, and right in the middle, this is why everyone uses walk-in wardrobes, you have this wardrobe and all of around it is other rooms that you are able to control. It is the perfect space to record in because it is a room within a room that you have control over. If you've got other people in that space, it's a bit difficult. So that is always going to be the hardest thing to do. But basically, remember, room in a room, separate yourself from external sounds. That's what you're trying to do there. The next thing you need to achieve, once you've got rid of all the external sound, you then need to look at the space you're actually recording in, and you want to achieve dead sound. Voiceover booths, if you are not this setup where I'm talking to a camera, but if you are actually doing voiceover, you want to achieve very, very dead sound. Voiceover booths are the most acoustically dead, I don't know if that was proper English, of all of the sound booths out there. When people sing or play instruments, oftentimes you want a bit of reverb, which is where sound waves bounce off a surface and come back and hit the mic. It sounds a bit fuller. It's like when you sing in a bathroom and you sound really good, and then you sing in another room and you think, why don't I sound as good? That, not to that degree, but that you want a bit of that in music. You don't want that in voiceover. And from what I understand, the reason for that is the cleaner you can catch the audio engineer can then add that in post if they want to. But it's much easier to add something than it is to take it out. So, to achieve dead sound, first thing, room size. You will hear a lot of people say it's a Goldilocks situation. You don't want a space that's too small, you don't want a space that is too big, you want a space that is just right. I have been in professional sound booths that are about the size of a phone box, and this is at world-class studios, and they're just fine. You can have problems with really small spaces with things called standing waves. I'm not going to go into detail about what they are, but small spaces can sometimes cause difficulty. If you haven't treated your space well, by having a small room and having the walls closer to you, it is easier for the sound waves to bounce off the wall and come back to the mic, so you might find you're getting a bit more reverb. But I don't personally think having a small room is the end of the world. Ideally, a slightly bigger room is good if you have the option, but room size is something a lot of us can't really control. You are limited by what you have. But in saying that, I would opt for medium to a smaller room versus like recording in your living room, because you can do it, a larger room, but it involves a lot more sound treatment, and that's just more money, which you don't want to have to outlay. Because you can get some really big recording studios, but you'll see all the walls are covered in acoustic panels, diffusers, ceiling clouds that, they've spent money to make that bigger space functional for recording. And I have been in what I would consider a much larger space to record. I did some audio dramas, and sometimes they'll stick you in a smaller booth, but sometimes they just stick you out in their foyer. But the foyer has been specifically designed to also be able to record in it. Next, room shape. In an ideal world, again, this is something you can't really change, especially when you're beginning. In an ideal world, if you can record in a space that is not a perfect square or rectangle, if you don't have parallel walls, arguably you're better off, because then it acts as a diffuser. So if you've got walls that aren't parallel, the sound waves won't necessarily bounce off and create the standing wave issue or bounce back to the mic. They'll bounce around the room. But again, we can't control this most of the time. Even if you buy one of the pre-made boxes like I have, they're usually square or rectangular. You can put things in, as I mentioned, diffusers, to combat those walls if you have them, but also you can just put things in like a couch, furniture, shelving units. You can use things that you have to make the room not necessarily have parallel walls. So I don't think that's a huge consideration. The main thing to achieve dead sound is acoustic treatment. And this is what actors usually have done when they tell me they've soundproofed their space. Acoustic treatment is all the foam, the panels, the stuff you see people putting on the wall. And what this does is it wrangles the sound waves. If we think of sound waves like sheep, sound waves are essentially a collection of moving particles. They really are like sheep. I had to film a commercial one time, sheep or goats. They stuck me in a car, and around me there was a herd of sheep and goats. And one sheep goes, and all the sheep follow, and then they come back. That's what sound waves are doing in a whole bunch of different directions. One particle might go that way, a cluster go that way, one particle goes that way. You can't control where they're going. I mean, they're generally going in the direction you're sending them, but as I'm talking, there might be some going that way, even that way. Acoustic treatment is like the shepherds trying to get the sheep back where they want them to be. There is kinetic energy, so these particles are moving around. So laws of science, which, I don't know much about science, I stopped doing it in year 10, but energy has to go from one form to another. So what you're trying to do with this acoustic treatment is you're trying to have the sound wave hit it and be absorbed. And what that means is the sound wave, these moving particles, these sheep, hit a surface. Instead of bouncing back, which will cause you issues like reverb and echo, you want it to go through this surface, so it needs to be a porous surface. It needs to, not like a tile or concrete, it needs to be like foam or a duvet or pillows. They're not hard. You want it to go through that surface, and because of the material and often the density of that, whatever it is that it's going through, it provides friction. So these little sheep are like, oh God, it's hard moving around in here. And the kinetic energy, the movement, turns into heat. So you've gone from sound waves to heat, which is why if you are in a booth for a while and you've done a lot of talking, it often starts to warm up. That's what acoustic treatment's doing. We're stopping the sound waves. We are absorbing the sound waves so that they do not come back and hit the microphone. Which is why if you go into a professional recording studio, when you go in there the first time, clap. Instead of hearing, if you're in a bigger space, you'll clap and you'll hear like the clap coming back at you. It is weird. You're not going to hear that in a sound studio, especially in a voiceover specific booth. So that is what we are trying to do with acoustic treatment. Stop the sheep from coming back. Hopefully that was a relatively clear explanation of what we are trying to achieve. Basically, we don't want external sounds coming into our space, and in the space, we want the sheep, the sound waves, to be absorbed and not come back to the mic. It's a two-prong approach. You have to think about both things. So if you're doing voiceover and you need really clean sound, you're going to need to focus on these things more than, say, what I'm doing right here, chat to camera. You can get away with a lot more on a video because people can see that I'm in a room. They expect there to be some sort of reverb or room sound. Yes, we want the sound to be clear, but when you're doing voiceover, professional voiceover for a client, they're not expecting to hear any of that. So you really need to focus on silence and dead sound. You've got things like the pre-made booths that I keep pointing here, you can't see here. There is a giant sound booth there, which I will show you in a bit. That's what I currently record in, but when I started, I just made a blanket fort. Another thing you can't see, which I will show you, is I have 2 acoustic blankets up in this space, which is what I changed recently because it sounded atrocious. That is what I used to make my sound booth. So essentially what I did, let me rub this out. I bought PVC pipes and little connected joins that they use for plumbing, and I built a frame that I could hang acoustic blankets on, because when I first moved to London, I was in this tiny little flat that, I kid you not, had no cupboards. Even the bathroom didn't have a cupboard. I mean, the kitchen had a few cupboards, obviously, because kitchen. Not a single cupboard outside of that. It was weird. There really wasn't much space for cupboards anyway. So I was like, to record, I need somewhere to be. So what I did was, I built let's see if I can draw this poorly. I built a rectangular frame. That was bad. Okay, built a rectangular frame like this, and I had joins around the middle of it as well. And then I used one side as the door. But I essentially built this out of PVC pipes. It didn't really take that long. You get a little hacksaw and you chop them all up. And then hung 1, 2, 3, 4 acoustic blankets on it. All up, this probably cost me £250, which would be, what, 350 US dollars, 500 Australian dollars, which is not the cheapest thing in the world. But if you're getting into voiceover, there's always going to be a cost of some description. You can't expect to do it with no financial outlay. It's the same as any business. There will be some cost to start up. But this is very manageable as long as you have a quiet space. So this, what I built, this voiceover booth, did a pretty good job at the acoustic treatment. Did absolutely nothing in terms of silence, to the point where it's such a small apartment. If Eric was breathing, I could hear him breathing. And I was like, Eric, can you stop breathing? My microphone can hear you. Which is why I later upgraded to this booth, because I thought that was a bit unfair. Hey, you're in your house. Can you just be quiet at all times? But something like this can be a great option, especially if you've got a room inside a room somewhere that you can put it. So you've sort of created soundproofing and then treated your space. Other options you have for voiceover, you can get the acoustic foam. Don't just stick acoustic foam on every surface, especially the stuff you get off Amazon. From what I understand, not just Amazon, there are other sites too, but I think it's a bit less dense and therefore it doesn't actually do anything. There's acoustic foam and then there's cheapo stuff like furniture packing foam that you don't want. But there's a lot of things you can use that you have at home. Mattresses, pillows, memory foam pillows are great if you have any of those. Duvets or doonas, as I would say. People love walk-in wardrobes because the walls are already lined with clothing, but you want to make sure it's thick where possible. Don't just stick a sheet up and think you've done what you need to do. A sheet is going to provide zero friction for those sheep. They're just going to go straight through it. Sheep, sound waves. So there's a lot of things you can do. When I go home to Australia to record, well, to visit, I take my work with me. There is a linen cupboard in the middle of my parents' house. It is the only room inside the house with no external walls, so I sit in this linen cupboard very uncomfortably, but I finally mastered the art of getting my sound studio in there. I take all the cushions off there in the sitting room, off the couch, cushions around me, a duvet on the top, and I create this little pigeonhole and then a duvet over the door behind me. And it actually sounds pretty good. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with stuff that you already own. Just be very careful to not have it touching you, because microphones are very sensitive. You can create noise accidentally in your space. I learned this even before this booth. My very first booth in Sydney was just me holding a doona over my head in one of those slidey wardrobes. It wasn't walk-in, but I had nowhere else to do it. And my hair, if I moved, it would rub against the duvet, the doona, and the microphone picks that up. So in an ideal world, don't do what I did. So that is all sound as it relates specifically to voiceover, but the same principles apply for any of your sound needs. You're essentially just trying to remove the noise and capture the signal that you want as cleanly as possible. The cleaner audio it's the same as when you're filming. You ideally want to catch things in camera so you don't have to go fix it later. Same with sound. You want to catch it as cleanly as you can so you have more flexibility in post. This setup here, the first video I did in it, I had no acoustic treatment of any description, and I have no furniture. So it's quite a large living room with no furniture in it. The only thing I had in it was my sound booth next to me, which probably was actually doing something, but not much. It was quite bad. So I had to process the heck out of it on the back end to try and get it to sound good, and I still don't think it sounded great. It is much harder to make audio sound good in post using all these plugins and effects, and it can be pretty expensive if you want to buy the ones that are good, versus just doing a couple of things to make it not bad in the first place. So I'll show you this space in a second and you'll see what I mean by no furniture. What I have subsequently done, and also I used a shotgun microphone, which was placed, it was close to me, but it wasn't particularly close. So I had a lot of room tone, I had echo, I had a lot of things going on. What I have subsequently done is gone and found 2 of my acoustic blankets, put one right behind the camera, one here. I've got my sound booth here, which does act as a little bit of gives me assistance. And there's some, well, I don't think they're doing much. There's some blinds over there at the very least. I don't think they're doing much to help me. But it's amazing with these acoustic blankets how much of the room tone has been diminished. I'm getting much cleaner sound. I'm also using a little lav mic now, much closer to me than the shotgun was. So the audio I'm getting is much cleaner, and they're really straightforward fixes. If I had a rug, I probably would have also put a rug on the floor. And if I had actual curtains, I probably would have put actual curtains up. But most of my house is no furniture and a lot of camera gear. So I don't have those things yet. What I'm going to do is switch to my little camera stick. I need to go and find it, because then I can show you exactly what I've been using for anybody that is interested to see my current setup. Okay, so I'm on my camera stick now, and I will show you first of all, this is currently where I film. So I'm just going to turn myself around. Right, so you've got over here some blinds which are doing pretty much nothing. Here's the desk setup. You can see right next to it, I've got on a light stand an acoustic blanket. If I go over here, you can see from back here, I need to get in the light. We have 2 giant acoustic blankets right next to me, and here, this thing here is my sound booth. So you can see that that probably isn't doing much, but it's still a giant absorbent surface, which is great, and that has made a huge difference. Before, these 2 didn't used to be there, so all I had was this room out here. which, as you can see, is just a giant. I've already started sounding more echoey. I don't know if you can hear that, but the audio's already got echoey. It's just a giant room with nothing in it, aside from my corner here and my sound booth. My sound booth is where I record all my audio, my voiceover, sorry. This is a Demvox Eco 200. They come not pre-made, but in giant pieces that you put together like Lego. So you can choose your configuration. I added another window because I wanted to be able to see the outside world. And in here, aside from my mess, you can see I've got a lot of acoustic foam all over the walls. This stuff comes with the built into the box. I haven't had to do anything to it. I could probably afford to put some bass traps in up the top, but I have not done that. My voice is not particularly low. I've got on the desk here, this is a custom cut to size, quite thick felt, because I was getting reverb back to the mic. Arguably, I shouldn't have my computer screen right behind my mic, but I like having a big computer screen. Now, another thing to keep in mind, I built this PC specifically because I wanted to do this. The screen is in here. The tower that makes all the noise is outside. All the cables, you can see I've got cable spaghetti down here. Cable spaghetti goes into the booth because that is another one of those external noises that you don't want. This is why, how do I turn this around? Turn around. Cool. This is why a lot of people use Mac computers. They do have quiet fans often. I've found I have a Microsoft Surface now that I use for travel to do my audio, and I found that doesn't have, occasionally it has a fan, but it's really not that loud. But every other Windows-based PC I've owned has a loud fan, and you just can't have that for voiceover. I refuse to use Apple because iTunes annoyed me one too many times back in the day, so I haven't used them since, I think I was in year 12. It's been a while. But that's why a lot of people have Apple laptops, because they have a very quiet fan, and you can have that next to your mic and you don't have any issues with external noise, but you just have to consider all of those things. So hopefully, I feel like that was really long, but there you have it. That is my sound setup, what I use for both voiceover and for these videos, and what I used to use for voiceover before I had that box, and the theory of sound to help explain it. If there is anything else you want answered, hopefully in a less long form video, or if that wasn't clear and you need me to break it down further, because it might not have been clear. Hopefully when I'm editing it, I will find that it is clearer than I feel like it just was. Let me know in the comments.